Back with another stories from the other side. You guys, these transformation stories are gold because it is so important to see somebody else who they get it. They went through it. They made it out on the other side. And I have learned so much in sharing these stories with you and with the women who have been on. So I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. Let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and today I have Ella. She is the host of On Air with Ella, an amazing podcast that focuses on wellness, mindset, and success for women over 35. In fact, I was just telling her, I listened to the episode all about, balancing your hormones and can we really drink alcohol over 40 and learning the hard truth that it's just not in the cards anymore. So I love her. I hate her a little bit, but her podcast is so amazing for you to find all sorts of random education, knowledge, support when it comes to wellness and mindset. So welcome, Ella. Thank you for joining me today.
I'll be right back. I need a drink, Erica.
I'm not going to lie. I was like, gosh, I really feel like we need to have a glass of bubbly to cheers this episode because we had kind of been chasing schedules and moving back and forth. And then, what pops in my mind is that darn episode. And I was like, wah, wah.
Moderation, my friend, moderation. Not in all things, but.
Right? Charcoal pills. I found when I eat charcoal pills when I drink, my life is glorious. That is something I most definitely picked up later in life. So,
Erica, we're here to change lives. Anyway, I am so honored to be on the air with you today. And I'm really honored that you are allowing me to spend time with your audience. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I wanted to have you on as a stories from the other side, because not only have you done amazing things with your podcast, but who you have grown into being, all the different versions of you from being thrust, into your divorce and figuring out who you are is really such an inspirational story for other women. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your history and kind of your divorce experience?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's so funny, right? Because when you tell your life story in whatever capacity, it sounds so linear and so tidy. And whenever I hold events or I do keynote speaking and someone introduces me and they're like, this is Ella. She's founded 4 businesses and she's blah, 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 blah. And what I do is my second slide is I'll get up and I'll show the bio that nobody ever hears about. And one of the things that's on that bio are the 2 businesses that failed, okay, the marriage that failed, and a couple of other things that aren't quite so bright and shiny that tend to not show up in the bio that we lead with, right? But as a bit of background and context, I got divorced in the early 2000s. It has been a minute, Erica.
It was a different lifetime.
It feels like 3 me's ago, if you will.
I do. I believe it too. Because that's about right.
But it's still very much a part of me. And it's very much a part of my identity. And for those of us who had children in our practice marriages, it will never not be a part of me. So,
and what I love is, when you are talking about it, right? And you're like, it was the greatest failure of my life, because those failures are often our greatest learnings.
I have to say that I don't want to be cheeky about people's real sentiment, especially when it comes to loving their children. But I know a lot of people, one of their saving graces as they're mourning the loss of their marriage is, well, I had Joe and Susie, and therefore it was not a waste. I fully appreciate that. I fully get it. Okay. But
I literally just got asked that question on a podcast this morning. They're like, everybody says, oh, well, thank God I got my kids out of it. Did you make a mistake? Right? Sorry to cut you off, but carry on. We all say it.
No, you are never cutting me off. We all say it, but when I say that it's one of the greatest failures of my life, to be honest, what I'm referring to is the fact that it's a multitude of things, but not the least of which being, I have been in a very successful, healthy, happy marriage for 15 years now, still going. we're not slapping an end date on that one. And there is no way I could have cultivated this relationship, absolutely no way on earth, had I not gotten completely just decimated and had to rebuild and learn from myself after round one. You know what I mean?
I do. And I feel so the same. So when that question came up this morning, they're like, did you make a mistake? And I was like, I did, but I would have never gotten out of the marriage because I didn't know any better. Who I am now, being in partnership and understanding what it takes and a willingness to understand and compromise and work through, I didn't have any of those skills back then. So yeah, it failed. We didn't know what we were doing. And I don't know how we would have found, let me rephrase that. I don't know how I would have found those skills if I hadn't been thrust into the divorce. And so it was painful, but I like sit in a place where I'm really grateful because it made me level up and become a better person.
Yeah. And for those folks who are joining us in this conversation today who are just in it, you know what I mean? Or they're about to step in it. I can understand how that sounds too neat and tidy. But what's so important about what you're doing, Erica, and what we both try to do in our own way on our platforms is to show what good looks like and to show what survival looks like and to show what thriving after you've been through it looks like. So that's why I just think it's so important to get these stories told. So I appreciate you so much.
And there were a lot of years of ugly crying on the floor, of screaming, of wailing, of crying in the parking lot at work, of being triggered. So yeah, if you're sitting in that place and you're like, these ladies are crazy, or that's nice for you, right? I remember being like, oh, that's nice for you, when somebody'd be like, you'll be fine. You don't understand how badly it truly hurts. We see you. We understand that. And oh, we are here to support you through that phase because that phase sucks so much.
And it's like that with anything where there is deep struggle and deep suffering. So whether it's grief or whether it's like a disordered relationship with food, something that I talked about a lot in the past, somewhere in the past 8 seasons of podcasting, I share an entire journey because I was going through it in real time. And when you're in it, when you're in the dark, everything feels impossible and like they have something you don't. And in this case, I just want to say we are not the they. We are all the same side of the table. And so I just want to invite people into the conversation, no matter whether they are in that process.
Yeah, and definitely the stories that I created in my head about how everybody else was so happy, how my ex was already so happy, how his life was already perfect, how I was the only one alone on a Friday night. Woe is me. Like my mind created a lot of those stories and I had to challenge them. And then I realized that that was not so true. But in the moment, it felt very true. It was my reality.
Yeah, the stories that we make up become our reality. And here's a fun fact. You can make up whatever story you want. And so at first that's somewhat alarming. And when you realize the power in that statement, you can start getting your life back. You can make up and live whatever story that you want inside of the structure you live in the context of your life, in the place and time where you exist in the world. You get to make up your story. So why not make up the story that serves you? But anyway, I don't mean to get too meta, Erica.
You're all good, because what I wanted to talk about next actually is I really loved, you have a model for looking at, how you frame your response to all those millions of little things that come up, right? And you called it the CIA model. And I loved these 3 questions. And I think that they are so important to just jot them down. You guys put them on a little Post-it note, have them up somewhere so that when the storm hits, when the emotions threaten to overtake you, you've got these 3 questions to really look at and to understand and reflect back to yourself. Because when you reflect back to yourself, it's the only way you can change the story in your head.
Yeah, this model, and I call it the CIA model, and it's not because it's cool and it does not involve spies. I'll explain it in a minute. But this model has changed my life. And to be super clear, oh, by the way, I will send you a graphic that you can tape up. I'll send it to you, Erica. You put it in the show notes, and folks can just tape that thing up on their wall if they need to. But this model was taught to me. I have about 23 years in the corporate world. And this model was taught to me in terms in the business structure. And I sniffed out within 5 nanoseconds that this was something that can absolutely change my life in every area. And that is not hyperbole. Let me tell you what I mean. The CIA model is just an acronym for what can you control, where do you have influence, and where you have neither of those things, what must you accept and therefore adapt to. So C is control, I is influence, and A is accept and then adapt. So if you can just picture that, any circumstance that comes your way, and we can break this down. I'm just wrapping a little bit of context around this framework. When all of the things that nobody talks about in a divorce or in any type of difficult situation is, everybody appreciates that there was a divorce. There was the great break, right? But what we talk less about are the million ways people can continue to hurt one another over the course of the next 6 months, 6 years, 6 hours, for God's sake. I mean, the million little things that you can choose to react to or not react to, or have an expectation about, or have zero expectation whatsoever. And it can be anything from a holiday to the tone on a phone call, Erica. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yes. And I think too, what it brought to mind is we often say something like, I just have to get through until my kids are 18 and then I don't have to deal with my ex anymore. Well, the reality is then your kid gets married and then your kid has kids and there's grandkids in it. If there's kids in the middle, you are sharing the rest of your life with this person. And so when I saw these 3 questions, because what I love the most is that I was the influencer, not like social influencer as it is today, but an influencer in my relationship, right? Where I was the one that was pushing for things and trying to get him to persuade him to see that I had the right answers, right? And so when my divorce hit, I moved heavily into let go of control, allow somebody else to help move these things through, right? And so it was just, can I control it? Yes or no? If the answer is no, let it go, let it go, let it go. And so I think the power of these 3 questions in order, can I control it? Can I influence it? How can I accept it? Mind blown. It literally gets you to the point of being able to change your behavior.
Yeah, and there are a couple of tricks, if you will, within it. And I'm going to use a very generic example just to break the model down a little bit. So let's just talk about parenting or caretaking, okay? But to keep it really simple, I'm going to talk about parenting. Not everybody's a parent, but it's something that most of us have experienced, whether we were the child or the parent, and it's certainly relatable. Okay. When you have a little tiny baby, you are controlling every aspect of their life, quite literally, full stop. All right. They start to get a little bit older. They start to grow in their autonomy. And you start to realize that you are losing your grasp of whatever semblance of control that you thought you had. Maybe they're 2, maybe they're 3, maybe they're 13. But you start to realize that ain't about control anymore. Like, you can try. Okay. But you would both be better served if the question you posed to yourself was, wait, I might not be able to control, but where do I have influence? Well, as a parent, the answer is you have a hell of a lot of influence. So let's start breaking it down there. And obviously we could go as deep on this as one could possibly go, because then you start looking at, am I trying to influence with just words? Am I influencing with my actions as well? Et cetera. But right now we're staying at 30,000 feet here. Okay. And then there are some spaces, let's say that child is an adult now. Let's say that child is making choices that do not align with your vision for them. Okay. I'm sure it's never happened, but just in case it did, you don't have control. In fact, you don't even have influence at this point, Erica, and you have to either continue to suffer in your control and influence fallacy, or you understand that there are some things you just have to accept. And inside that acceptance, you say, okay, all right, I'm going to release, I'm going to accept. In a way, I'm going to surrender to the truth here. So how will I adapt? And how you adapt, here's the funny thing about this cycle. How you adapt and the choices that you make in that acceptance can also be run through the where do I have control, where do I have influence, which part must I accept? I mean, and it honest to God, it changed my life. I've never looked back. And I wish I could tell you who originated this model. I have looked for years. I learned it in a corporate environment, and I have looked up original attribution, Eric, and I've never found it. So I just want to get that on the table.
Whoever was in that training and development team created a gold mine and they don't even know it, because here it is. They're now going to see it. They're going to hear the podcast. They're going to see it and they're going to be like, hey, feel free to raise your hand if you created this. What I like about it is I have been seeing a lot of comments lately, and we all do it. We fall into a victim mode of what our ex or our current partner is doing to us. How can I change anything, Erica, because they are doing all of these things? And so I think I want to run through another example just because I think this is so powerful in terms of you're now trying to work with your co-parent. Okay. I could not control how my ex chose to show up and parent my son. So I knew that I held space for my son to share his emotions. My son didn't feel comfortable sharing them with his dad. I tried to mediate a little conversation between them to not role play, but role model, right? Like, here's how we do it. This is why my son comes to me with all his problems. He wants to tell you, but he doesn't feel safe. I tried, right? It was all the things that I tried to control. And then when I couldn't control it, I got really mad and really irritated, and I send the zingers and I blame the ex, and I'm so angry and resentful at him because now when my son comes home, I'm cleaning up the mess and I got to deal with the big feelings of the 5-year-old who didn't have his feelings acknowledged all weekend, right? So there's looking back at it, what can I control or not control? When things finally changed with my ex was when I realized it is not my job to control how he co-parents, nor can I control how he co-parents. And I let it go. I was like, you know what? If he never changes his co-parenting, can I accept this? And what's my role? And I realized that my role was to help my son navigate his emotions, to know that it's not his fault, that adults have problems too. And whatever, dad might be having a rough day. That has nothing to do with you as the child. And I learned how to accept it. Then later, I came back to learn how I could influence it, not by dictating, but by asking questions, by sharing, this is what's working for us. Would you be open to trying this differently? Right? And then where did it lead me? Right back to control. I can ask the questions to show him what I'm doing, to ask him if he, cares to join us on any of these types of things. And it's up to him, yes or no. I can't control it. There I am back. Do I need to influence it again or let it go and learn how to accept it? And so flowing through those three, you can't control it. Can you influence it? Sure. But don't try and influence it just so you can control the situation.
It is 100% a cycle. And you make me think of probably an infinite number of more. But when you get a divorce and your ex-partner brings in a new partner, guess what? Whatever control you thought you had, it just took a bit of a dip, my friend. And that is a really challenging part of this process and a great test for this model, because at the end of the day, you have no control. In fact, we are delusional in life in general, in every context, in my opinion. We are delusional about the amount of control we believe that we do have or even should have, which is funny if you think about it. And we greatly underestimate, in my opinion, the amount of influence that we can have if we're operating from a healthy place.
From a healthy place of what is in the best interest of both parties, not how can I influence for me to win. And that was a big part of our problems because the third party, the extra woman stayed right away. And so we wrote our divorce decree. We set our agreements. She moved in a few months later and was like, I didn't agree to them. And And he stopped doing almost all of them. Right. And so now you're in, and I was in another big lesson was, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? I was absolutely legally right. We had a dog. The dog was to go back and forth with the child, right? Those were the two kids, the four-legged one and the two-legged one. And we were supposed to split the medical bills. Well, the girlfriend decided she wanted her own dog. Now our dog was no longer welcome at her house. So now he's like, well, why am I paying half the vet bills if I don't get the benefit of the dog? Am I right that I could have taken him to court for it? Absolutely. Did I want to waste my time and energy and bitterness fighting him over that? No. I was like, can I accept this and move on? Yes, because I don't want to be stuck in the lifelong battle. But we had battles up until she parted ways, to be honest. And then it was funny because then my ex showed up and I'm like, dude, too little, too late. I don't know who you are anymore. It's been 6 years since we had a conversation about our child. We have shared details about our child. We have sent bulleted notes about our child, but this is not happening anymore. Like we lost that opportunity to rebuild into like, hey, the chapter's over, but we're good. We're a big extended family. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I've accepted that we're not in that manner.
Well, I think that you're underscoring something really important. I'm no therapist, but when we are hurt, and by the way, the other party doesn't have to be at fault and you're the victim to be hurt. My divorce was not a tragedy where one person committed a crime against the other and one person got to be the victim and one person got to be the perpetrator, metaphorically or literally. And it just failed. It was almost like a failure to launch as adults. Like we were too young when we got married. And then when we were fully adulting, like failure to launch, right? And it just sort of, and despite the fact that there was no obvious, like, you did this, you did that, besides the fact that there was no clear perpetrator or victim, it's still incredibly painful. And there are still hurt feelings about pretty much everything for some period of time. And my point to you is when feelings are hurt and when you're questioning your own worth and you are feeling quite low, one of the ways that you might find that you feel better or more powerful or more seen is by exorcising some kind of control and trying to control the dynamics or trying to control the logistics or trying to control the tone or trying to be like, this is how the parenting needs to happen. I'm the key parent and you need to listen to what I say. And that is at the end of the day, ultimately poisoning you. So that sense of thinking that we hold all the strings and frankly, if we really got honest with ourselves, part of it is just trying to show up in a situation and try to feel a certain way and again, be seen. So much of that desire for control is masking a real hurt.
Yeah. And then we get in that place where we try and control details that we don't even really care about. We just want to hurt the other person. How many of you fought for things in your division of assets, that you could really care less about? You fought for the TV just because he loved the TV. You fought for the dishes just because she loved the dishes, right? But we get that way. And I watch it happen all the time. And then you get real nitpicky and it's tit for tat and this and that. And that's where I think then, the other part of it is like this metaphysical, the energetic side. When you just step back and allow things to just be, some of it works its way out. I remember my ex was playing around with when he was actually supposed to have the kid back. And so it was supposed to be Sunday night at 7:00 and all of a sudden it's 7:05 and I'm, where are you? 7:10, you're late. 7:30, what the hell, right? He'd roll in at 8. He'd roll in at 8:30. He'd stop responding to text messages. When I stopped trying to control the situation and I was like, you know what? I'm annoyed. This is really messed up, but my kid is safe. I know where he is and he will eventually show up. Guess who stopped dicking around with the drop-off time? So there is a thing about like when you try to really control and force a narrative that you want, the other person fights even harder against you than just like, hey, can I accept this? Don't allow mistreatment. Don't write over your own boundaries, right? But can I accept this for a little bit and not worry about it? Yes, I can. I can walk away and see if it evens out on its own.
Yeah, this is not about being a wimp. This is not about being a doormat, not at all. But there is a huge line between there's a huge gap, I should say, between where that boundary really is and then where our ego would like it to be. And a couple of the tools that I employ anytime I'm dealing with a difficult circumstance, and my ego, quite frankly, is like demanding something, but my boundary's like way over there. You know what I mean? Like I just want to win. That's all it really is. One of the things that I do, especially in personal situations, having interacted and having co-parented now for 23 years, okay? My son is 23 years old. I ask him to tell people he's 18, like makes me feel better, but I have a 23-year-old kid. And we have co-parented. I mean, the truth is now, Erica, spoiler alert, my son's dad and I don't like calling him my ex-husband because I feel like I have one husband and that's the man that I'm married to. So I don't like attributing husband status, even with an X in front of it, to anyone else. It just doesn't sit right with me. But my son's dad and I, who were married for a decade, okay, we're friends now. He is like family to us. My husband and I had to stay with him for a week last year because our son was having surgery and we all needed to be in the same place. Like, it's wild what can happen. If you had asked me this 21 years ago, Erica, I probably would have responded with anger, if at worst, and cynicism at best. But there are still ways we can hurt one another because we are family. So there are still ways we can hurt one another. There are still holidays where I don't have my child with me. There are still, all of this stuff does not go away when they turn 18. Like, sorry, that's not a thing.
And I love that story because that was literally the goals I wanted. Like when we got divorced, I was like, look, we're just not the right fit. No hard feelings. We tried. We did our best. We had a lot of good years. Let's just like kick ass at being co-parents. The ringer was the ego part. When a third party got brought in, when people aren't doing the healing work, when your ego is running the show and is inflaming all the thoughts in your mind that you need to like step up and be respected and you need to have this stuff happen for you to know that you're loved or whatever, it creates a lot of waves in the ocean. It makes the storm and they has to calm down. It has to just settle down to a place where you can be like, okay, can we navigate this back to being in a place? Because for my son and even for me, I believe that like, it's just one big extended family. Family is family, whether you choose it. Like some of my family are choice friends that I have. Not just blood work, not just who was actually in the family tree. So, and nobody's perfect. So let them in the circle. Hello, my crazy podcast family. It's time to level up your connection and become a club member. If you've loved the content but are craving answers to your specific questions, if you're looking for a way to get help when you need it, if you're ready to move from just listening to creating change in your life, it's time you became an Instagram subscriber. You'll unlock exclusive private content that you won't find anywhere else. Subscribers get VIP treatment with direct Q&A sessions, weekly lives, and the ability to get support when you need it, all on a platform you're already on. No new signups, no new websites. Just head over to our Instagram page, click that subscribe button, and join the inner circle now. Subscribe today and keep the crazy fun going.
Well, can I share two really like almost stupid, simple things that I do mentally? Like two tricks. And the first one is very simple, but try them and full refund if you don't like it. But the first thing they're in no order, but one of the things that I do is I just release all expectation. And frankly, this really helps with extended family. There are only two people in the entire world where I even allow myself to have expectations with. I'm married to one of them and I gave birth to the other. Okay. I have an expectation. And if my expectation's not being met, or my needs aren't being met, then we'll have a conversation the same way that they interact with me, to be super clear. Like that it's symbiotic. Now, with extended family, with in-laws, with adult siblings, with your parents, with your ex, A releasing of expectations. Now, I'm not talking about you said you'd show up at Johnny's graduation and you didn't. That's not what I'm talking about here. There's some nuance here. What I'm talking about is I need nothing from you. I need nothing. I do not need validation. I do not need to be seen. I do not need to be thought of a certain way by you. I have zero expectation. It is not your job to make me feel good. It is not your job to make me feel to improve my day in any way. This is a factual exchange where we need to get from A to B, and so that C can happen. Now that sounds like the least romantic, least compassionate thing that I could ever say. I love the people in my life and I love them like a Leo. Okay? Like I love deeply, but you set yourself to be let down when you have all these emotional hooks and all of these people outside of your circle of influence. Yeah. I love my brothers, but I seek zero validation from them. I don't even expect them to do the things that I ask them to do because they are full autonomous human beings with whom I have not hooked myself emotionally. And again, there's some nuance there. We could probably talk for an hour about that before it made sense to somebody, but somebody's hearing that and it's resonating. So a release of expectation with that X is absolutely clutch. That's one of them.
And I would say if it didn't make sense, and that is when you're supposed to DM us. That is when you need one-on-one or group support, because it's a lot more than we can get through. And it's so nuanced down to the specifics, because what we literally have to do is help you unravel all the stories that have been knitted together. Why do you have that expectation? What is the core wound that you're trying to fulfill? Can you fulfill it on your own before you expect somebody else to also help you support it? Super complex, but that is the work, narrowing through that. Was there another one you wanted to share too?
Yeah, this one's short and sillier. And that is that I have this voice in my head and it's 86-year-old me. All right. And I will often sort of check in with 86-year-old me. And I basically, if I'm dealing with some BS that I'm just like, I cannot believe I cannot believe I'm arguing over whose house the backpack was supposed to be in, right? I just check in with 86-year-old me. And if she's like, you're not even going to remember this, like, this is not a thing. This is nothing. And you're putting so much energy into it. And you're putting your whole ego into this. And you're fighting with a bear for your life. And you're talking about a stupid backpack. And so just checking in with 86-year-old you as to whether something, it just helps you zoom out and look at something and see it for what it is.
Yeah. And I love that. I'm gonna have to steal that one, because so often in the moment, it seems like it is the most important thing because it's attached to all those other belief systems, right? Him remembering the backpack matters because he's disrespecting my time, because now I have to go fix more shit that he screwed up in my life. And I've already carried the weight of this relationship, right? We don't realize how deep that thread goes, but it does. And that's where we get stuck. I will say that one of the biggest things that I have been surprised by as I've started this podcast and really started walking back through my own divorce journey was how many of those horrific moments I forgot. And they were so real. And that's where, like, season 1, episode 1, when my 3 friends interviewed me, and one of my girlfriends, Leah, was like, oh my God, I can't believe the amount of grace that you extended. And I had completely forgotten. You know, like, that's core to who I am. It's one of my core values, but I forgot about that. And then she's like, oh my gosh, the night explosions of trying to get him to bed. I had forgotten about all these things, but they were so real. I mean, sobbing on the floor. I don't know how to help my child. I don't know how to get through this. Why does this continue to happen? And eventually they do fade. And so being able to ask yourself that question of, will this matter in 10 years, in 20 years? Will I still be thinking about this one moment?
There's something that we do too, Erica, that you're reminding me of. When we have a big event in our life, capital B, capital E, when we have a big event in our life, whether you got pregnant as a teenager or you got a divorce or you lost a parent, God forbid, when you were young, like some, capital T type of trauma, we tend to pin almost everything that goes wrong onto that event. And I just want to remind us that sometimes shit happens and you're in the middle of it because you have a child or because you love somebody or because it's your birthday. Like, in other words, this is really important for parents who have children in divorce. Okay. Really important that you don't take every single thing that goes wrong and pin it to it's because we got a divorce, because it changes the types of decisions that you make. It changes the way your resilience muscle works, and you end up accommodating things you should never be accommodating. So I just want to flag that and say that might have been happening no matter what. Maybe someone stole his toy at school and so he's pitching a fit on the floor that night. Maybe he just needed to have a fit that night. And it doesn't mean it's always true. But we have to be so careful not to pin every single thing that goes wrong on the big T trauma, because it's the sort of logical, sensible, easy thing to do. Sometimes it just is.
Yeah. And I did that. I pinned it on his dad. Because you cheated, because we had to get a divorce, because you quit, because you didn't parent him right this weekend. When the reality was, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with a little 4-year-old really struggling to go between two houses, to live in two different places, to deal with all the newness that he had in his life that he had no control over. And so getting past that, stopping the calls of like, this is your fault, you did this, really helped. And I think that leads us to the last little topic I want to get in before we sign off for our chat today, because it was one of the ones that was the most fun to learn. It kind of like shocks the rest of the world. And that is releasing the fear of judgment. I loved the term unfuckwithable, that I had to get real clear that I did not care anymore what society told me, what my family told me I had to do, what anybody else told me I needed to do, because at this point, everything had already fallen apart. So I got to write the story of my life, of how I showed up, of what I wanted to commit to or not commit to. And it came with backlash. It came with pressure from my family, with comments, with whatever. But I was like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I care what I think, and I care what I'm doing, to help my son.
That's a gift of divorce. It can be. A gift of divorce can be basically because you don't have the time or the bandwidth or the emotional capacity to worry about what other people are thinking. Honestly, I think that's worse pre-divorce, when you're like, well, I obviously can never get a divorce, so I'm stuck in this situation. I can never get out of this because. And I think we let the fear of judgment keep us in situations for much longer than we need be. That can be everything from a business to a marriage. Right. And once you have that catastrophic divorce, I don't know who has the time to start worrying about what people are thinking about it. I sure as hell didn't. Doesn't sound like you did either. And it was such a gift in its way.
It was. It took me a while to get to it. But once I realized that, I was like, this is delightful. You mean I don't have to like passing around the volunteer. We need volunteers at school. Who's coming into the classroom? And I was like, I'm not. And I don't care what you think about it. I literally am just barely holding my life together, and I don't have an hour to come volunteer. Now, as I moved further through it, right, by the time my kid got to like 5th grade, I was now working from home. I had lots of time, and I had lots of emotional resilience. And all of a sudden I started volunteering all the time at the school. And I was like, now I can help you. But in that moment, I didn't care. The teachers, join the PTO, PTA, whatever it was. They're like, join this. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm not even going to take the flyer.
I'll have things that are not happening for 600. Alex, thank you. I think that I'm not some huge crazy rebel. I don't have like this wildly eccentric life because it's just, I don't care about anything or anyone. That's not what we are describing at all. I just simply could not care how Bob felt about the fact that I was getting a divorce. I mean, it shocked people, I'm sure. I didn't spend any time thinking about it. It disappointed people, I'm sure. I care how my family feels. I care that they were losing a family member in their way. I care about my son's father's family, my extended family, and I care about all of them deeply. Can I spend 5 minutes worrying about how they perceive me? No. You know why? Because I can't control it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to spend any time trying to influence it. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to live in my own truth, doing the very best that I can. And I accept that you may or may not be on board with that. I'm fully at peace with that. That honestly is one of the greatest gifts this type of change in your life can offer you.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I did not make my family happy. But I also had to learn, I had to stand in the truth that I am the only divorced person. There's an aunt that's divorced. They didn't have kids. There was no talking ever again to the uncle. That was cut out of the family, right? So
Wow.
you're looking at the first divorce with a kid. Everybody's married. Everybody's worried about how this is going to impact them. And the amount of comments I got from immediate family about, well, you better not forget that you have a kid in this new life that you're building. Because I used to go on a trip to decompress and find myself, because I used to go away for the weekend when I didn't have my son. Really, the amount, and I had to stand in that knowing and be like, that's fine. I was mad and hurt. I'm still hurt by it, but I let it go. They had their own grief and their own fears and their own ego stuff that was tripping them up. And they had never been in this place. So they couldn't make the same choices I was making, or when I would decline on driving 6 hours to go to a family holiday together because I didn't have the energy for it. Or I'd get there and I'd nap a lot. Napping was my go-to. I needed it. I was so done.
Could have been worse, Erica.
Could have been a lot where I could have been doing a lot of drugs, and I wasn't. I was napping and visualizing and meditating. And I remember they'd come up to like my room at my mom's house and be like, "What are you doing? Are you like even going to get up?" And not a depressed napping. It's like, I went and laid down for 20 minutes, you guys. Like, I get to do these things for me, and you can have your opinions, but I know what's best for me. And I no longer am persuaded by pressure from an outside source.
Yeah, people get really angsty when you break your social contract with them. And I'm here to say, break it. Like, break it.
Break it, because how do you know if they keep you around just because they can keep you in a contract, or if they really like you? And if they really like you, they're going to be with you as you go through all your phases, and I had to nap a lot more then than I do now. Like my energy, I couldn't volunteer, but then I could. Your capacity and changes with the seasons. And so they should be able to stay with you.
I want to share one last thing, Erica, that my mom said to me. I'm so grateful for her for this. She said, I was a single mom. I had just graduated from business school. I was starting my own business. I was getting in a divorce from somebody who was about to become a doctor. So a lot of people thought that was really stupid. I had a number of challenges going on. And I may have just said this, but my son was two-ish. And my mom said to me, I was kind of having a mental breakdown.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. And my mom said, do not paint your future with the brush that you're holding today. She said, maybe 2 weeks at a time, maybe a month. Anything after a month, you're lying to yourself. You have no idea which way it's going to shift. Do not paint tomorrow with the brush you are holding today. And I just want, if I can share that, if I can amplify that and have it land on anyone who needs to hear it, then this will be well worth it. Do not paint your future with the brush you are holding today. Everything shifts, especially if you are able to start creating the space for it.
Get goosebumps. We'll make a little quote. We'll post it on the social channel. It'll say that, and it'll say from Ella's mom.
Ella's mom.
I think that looks perfect. It's such a beautiful sentiment, though, because we get caught up in trying to say that it's forever and ever and ever going to be like this. And you got to take it little pieces, one day, 1 week, 1 month at a time. And all of a sudden, this is how you build a new lifetime. It becomes a year. It becomes 5 years. I remember sitting there being like, oh my God, it's been how many years since I got divorced? Like, I want to tell a new story. I'm ready to move forward into something else. So thank you, Ella, for joining us today. Such an inspiring conversation. As always, you guys should check out Ella's podcast, On Air with Ella. I'm telling you, amazing, amazing little nuggets that you can forever take away and change your life all around the mindset, the wellness, and again, specifically for women over 35. So until next week, give yourself grace. Decide what kind of paintbrush you want to paint your future. and we will talk to you soon. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.